world is going on at our other border?
Well, I'll tell you what, we're seeing an incredible surge when you look at it, compared to year over year. Traditionally, that is the slowest spot of all of our borders, the coastal and the northern and the southern. It's the slowest. Usually, 3 years ago, they were averaging about 90 arrests per month or less. They are 10 times that amount now. Year to date, they're, since October, they're almost at 10,000. So that's a significant increase. But what's scary is, the demographics of folks that are hitting that border, which is the longest land border in the world. We're looking at about, 83 different countries they have seen just since October. Nationals from 83 different countries. And that count is going up. Predominantly it's citizens of India. A significant portion of those arrests are citizens of Mexico that the cartels are flying in. It's easier to get into Canada than most countries. We could do something about this quite simply just with sitting down diplomatically with our neighbors to the north and talking about who's coming in and how they're getting access to that northern border. But it doesn't seem like there's any interest in that whatsoever.
So I'm looking at a map. You got me a little distracted with your statement a second ago. Largest land border. So I'm like, hold on, that can't be right. So I'm looking over at Russia and Kazakhstan, or Russia and Mongolia. Those are pretty long, but it says here that sure enough, this is the longest land border between two countries, U.S. and Canada. Is that right?
That is correct. Yeah, because
that
Russia splits with Mongolia and they split with China. In Kazakhstan, this is one solid two-country border, and it is it's a long one, longest in the world, and it's very.
So all they got to do is get into Canada. So you said, yeah, because never needed to be, right? It's not like we're worried about a bunch of Vancouverites coming down or something, right? So this could be a big problem. Like this could be super vulnerable. I guess it's harder for them to get to Canada, right? So if you make it to Mexico, how do you get to Canada? The only way to get there is to fly, right? So maybe we could solve this problem easier if we
solve this problem pretty easily. We know that fully 2/3 of all of those that are coming on that portion of the border are from Mexico. We know the cartels are buying them tickets and flying them in. Well, they're visa exempt. So if they meet certain requirements that you can forge in Mexico, because you can buy anything over there, you can get into Canada fairly easily, legally. Just buy the ticket. And we know, these migrants from Mexico have a support structure in the United States. Many of them have relatives here that can pay for those tickets and pay the cartel $5,000 to $10,000 each to get them into Canada. Once they're in Canada, it's a hop, skip, and a jump to move in, especially during these summer months. It's a little bit harder in the winter, but right now, since the beginning of June, they are averaging 100 apprehensions a day. So they are doing in one sector what the entire area used to do last year in a day.
You said they're visa exempt. What does that mean, visa exempt?
That means that they don't have to actually apply for a visa with their passport. There's going to be a waiver. And that's our problem worldwide. Most of the people coming into the United States from these exotic countries, from Eastern Europe, from Northern Africa, they're hitting certain hubs that have no visa requirements for them to land, meaning that immigration officers are not going to ask them what their purpose of entry is to any great extent. Turkey is one of those partners that we could turn around and tell Erdogan, stop this traffic. They're not staying in Turkey. Everybody from the Congo, from Senegal, from every place else that's hitting San Diego and the Tucson area, they're hitting Turkey first. If we hit those partners and say tighten up on those countries because we know they're ending up here, that would severely stop that flow.
Wow.
But we don't do that.
So they
We're
go
not even
from
doing that with Canada.
So they go from like the Congo or wherever to Turkey, and then where do they go after Turkey?
Many of them will go in through Ecuador and then just come through the southern border. We know the Haitians were coming into Nicaragua. That slowed a little bit. So there's just a handful of countries that if we stop those transit nodes and work with those countries, we have a ton of leverage. I mean, Donald Trump proved that last administration when we started remaining in Mexico.
And I was gonna bring up Ecuador. So Ecuador is the start of the southern journey because you can get into Ecuador easily. So you go to Turkey, then Ecuador. So these are two countries where you don't need visas to travel. And then once you get on Ecuador, you hoof it up into Mexico.
Yeah.
Wow. And you're saying you can also go from Turkey to Canada?
No, I'm saying that's one of the routes that folks come in through the southern border. There's a few transit nodes that if we attack them diplomatically and said, hey, listen, we're going to, stop trade. We're going to charge more. We're going to have embargoes, whatever we have to do to leverage that. I mean, especially Canada, we're in a trading agreement with Mexico and Canada. There's a lot of leverage, but there's just no interest in stopping this traffic.
Okay. And speaking of interest, we talked with Senator Marshall a moment ago about Biden's executive order and how it doesn't obviously do anything. Can you give us maybe one of the loopholes that are in it that make it completely worthless?
Well, first of all, anything having to do with families or minors, they have been exempted from any enforcement. So bring a child and you're usually home free. So those are the big loopholes in this one. The second one is just logistics. I think a lot of us who haven't done this, as a career for as long as I've been in, don't realize that you can't just stack a plane with people from one moment to the next and fly around the globe dropping them off. It's a long process in many cases to have the countries accept those nationals and the aircraft before it leaves. So there's a limited. There are no aircraft in the air today for ICE for moving people right now. They'll start taking off in a little bit, but they'll only be a handful. So there'll probably be about 600 people removed from the country today, and there will be 4,000 to 5,000 coming the opposite way. So the math will never work out, and there isn't enough detention space to hold a surplus. The easy removals will be those from Mexico. They always are. That's what you're going to see a lot of, which we are seeing right now. It is no different. What some of the Border Patrol sectors in Texas are getting told is it is business as usual. We don't have the logistics for this.
Can there ever be logistics for it?
Not at the rate that we are right now. There were logistics before because you did not induce them to come to the United States. So when you reduce those entries, the logistics work. But they do not work when you're seeing 4,000, 5,000, 6,000. They especially don't work when you're at 10 or 11,000.
Yeah. Okay. So this memo got released, or it was a real memo that was sent to San Diego border sector. Let me read this because I don't know what this means. The memo instructs agents to process all single adults from 100 plus countries in the Eastern Hemisphere as NTA/OR, which means notice to appear, release on own reconnaissance, except for 6 countries, which are deemed mandatory referral countries: Uzbekistan, Russia, Tajikistan, Georgia, Moldova, and Kyrgyzstan. I don't know. What does all that mean?
That they won't be directly released automatically. That'll be contingent on space and another variety of factors. So they're taking a look at those. But once they run out of space, everybody's fair game. And that's the system we've been operating on. Is we've overcrowded up to 5 times capacity in some of these facilities, but it's because the surge is so great we cannot release them. We do not have the manpower to get them processed, to get them out the door. That's why you don't see the Ocasios in there screaming and hollering over overcrowded facilities, because they're just overcrowded so that we can release them all. We used to see that when we were detaining to remove, and that's why we were overcrowded under the last administration. We did not have catch and release. So what they're going to do with those is they will try holding those as a priority. They're going to remove
from the mandatory. Sorry, the priority is the mandatory referral countries: Uzbekistan, Russia, Tajikistan, Georgia, Moldova, and Kyrgyzstan. Those are like hey, if you find someone from Uzbekistan, you hang on to them.
Yeah,
is that what that says?
Yeah, let's take a look at these. The rest, get rid of them, basically. It's too hard to remove. You're going to see a lot of our hemisphere being the ones that are going to be set up for removal. But even then, that's overwhelming. Like I say, you only have so many aircraft that can take off, and that aircraft is not going to be flying 5 here and 10 here and 10 here and 5 here. It's going to be probably a plane going to a maximum of 2 countries in a day. So it may hit Honduras and El Salvador and then return, and then do it again tomorrow.
I wonder, real quick, you said one interesting thing about AOC. So the idea is because the detention center is so full, from AOC's perspective, that's good because anyone else who comes into America illegally, they have to just let him go because the detention center is full. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I'm saying if you're concerned, if you have any humanitarian concerns at all, imagine a prison 5 times over capacity. It won't happen, by the way, because they will not pack a prison that heavily.
Sure.
But our detention, as far as immigration is concerned, has gotten that way. Our congressman had visited it here just in recent months, in December. So 5 times overcrowded, and there isn't a cry about how inhumane that is to have 500 people in space for 100. It's literally, I mean, I don't have words to describe what that looks like, and I've seen it, double crowded. I can't imagine 5 times. So nobody protests. Nobody cares because it's just for a couple of weeks. You know, if you can just tolerate that suffering for a couple of weeks, you're going to get released. You're going to get to go to New York. You're going to get to go to Chicago. So we're okay with it. Because if we come out, we protest it, you'll do something about it and stop this flow. Now, they were excited when it was they're holding them because they're going to send them back to Venezuela. They're going to send them back to Cuba. They're going to send them back to wherever they came from, or they're going to send them to Mexico in lieu when their country doesn't take them. That was a big deal. It's not a big deal anymore.
That's great. Good point. Talking to Randy Clark, Breitbart News, Texas border reporter. So what do you think is known about people from Uzbekistan, Russia, Tajikistan, Georgia, Moldova, and Kyrgyzstan that our own government said, hang on to those folks?
So I just think that there's a mechanism for removal. There's probably some ability for us to get those back. I don't know that it's an exact security concern as much as it is. I think we can remove some of these and we'll vet them as well. So because when they determine they're too hard to remove, they're just not going to hold on to them because you'll be holding on to them indefinitely. And that's a bed you can't use for somebody that you can remove. But this ultimately, Senator Blackburn is absolutely 100% correct. This is not in and of itself going to have any material effect on the southwest border at all. It's not going to slow the flow. In fact, they're seeing, the same and similar numbers right now. And on some days it's a little bit busier, but on average, 5,000 are coming, and 5,000 a day roughly have come since that order was signed. So we're above the threshold. Now what? And the answer is not much.
Yeah, there you go.